Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to recap time. Today on the menu is going to be the super exciting battle between Richard Rapport and Jan Nepomniachtchi. Definitely the talk of town these days is going to be this game and the decisions that we've seen. A super fascinating scenario. So without further ado, let's jump right in. We are going to kick off with the Petrov, which seems to be a bit of a go-to for Nepo in this tournament as well. Second time round we see it, and we are actually headed for a variation that already raises a number of questions. So Rapport opted for this queen b3 line, which in itself is not really a noteworthy thing. It's, you know, just as equalish in the end as any other. But what was very curious was the fact that here, right after queen b3, bishop g4, he chose to go into this simplification with bishop takes, pawn takes, knight g5. Bishop e7, knight e4, queen d4. Absolutely a forcing line for the most part, especially after bishop e7. And here, queen takes b7 is a variation that is known to theory as dead draw, right? And from here on out, things get really, really interesting and curious because, let's just get to the point where the decisions are made that I would like to start talking about. So queen e8, bishop h3, this is the key idea. We still are following a game that was played and recorded. So this has already been known to opening theory. Takes, check, check. And that was the first chance for Rapport to take the draw. He decided not to do so, which by the way would have been a very sensible decision, especially knowing with the hindsight knowledge that he didn't really do his homework as far as this particular variation was concerned, but more on that in a couple of seconds. So instead he opted to play here f3, denying the perpetual check, queen d3, king g2, check back. Second chance to walk away with the draw, which is what is the correct result. Don't get me wrong, I'm not promoting that they should go for a draw, not at all. But you play the board and you play what's on the board. But after queen d3 again, he decided to go for knight d2. Now the problem with this move is that it allows black to play queen d7 and against any white response, knight a6 trapping the queen. Right? Just to be clear, the reason why black can't do that against king g2 is because after queen d7 I play bishop e3 and now I'm just going to munch the a7 pawn, the queen escapes, white is a rook up, and that's all she wrote. But knight d2 blocks the bishop in. What am I doing? And the bishop can't come out. So now queen d7 is going to come with knight a6. Now, the trickery about this position is that I'm going to give you right away the answer to one of the key questions. In the resulting position here, black is clearly better. Right? Now, this is what I think happened here. I don't think that Rapport did his homework, and I don't think that he analyzed this position. And Rapport is a very, very curious character in the top 10. In fact, the only one who has a very specific trait as far as his chess is concerned, which is probably best described as if he sees a move that looks really shaky, but can't prove it wrong by calculating the absolute heck out of that position, he's gonna play it. He trusts his calculation like a machine, and what he calculates is what goes. Whereas I would describe the rest of the pack to rely a little bit more on their intuition. So what that really means in practical terms is that their candidate moves are a lot more narrow, and they pick one of those very likely candidates and then they calculate the heck out of them. Whereas for Rapport, everything is on the table as long as it's not proven wrong by calculation. And I think that here he tried to calculate out the absolute heck out of this. In fact, he already spent a lot of time here and here, so he would already have been spending time calculating this. And he decided that he couldn't find what was wrong with this, and so he entered it. Now, the second thought on this is that when I saw this position last night as I was watching it for a little while, I could not believe my eyes. And the reason for that was not because of Rapport entered this. I would be extremely pretentious and in fact hypocritical if I said that. And a lot of people were like, how could he do this? I tell you how he could do this. Because if you ask me, as an international master, however little that is, with whatever meager rating I have, to evaluate this, and I know the evaluation of this position because I'm looking at it in the corner of my eye, but you ask me what this position is, evaluate this international master with black to move, with white to move, I would be looking at this position and go like, yeah, white is clearly better, no question. But because of the king is a little bit shaky, the h3 pawn is likely to drop, black has got drawing chances. And even right now, that when I know that the actual evaluation is vastly different, this is what my guts are telling me to say. And the only grandmaster who I saw on social media who actually backed it up was Grandmaster Emil Sutovsky, who said that, yeah, it's really easy to look up in the corner of the EVA bar or wherever your evaluation is, but this looks like a textbook case of two rooks outclassing the queen, and on top of that, we have got two absolute garbage pieces for black at first sight that are totally not cooperating whatsoever in this position with the rest of the pack. So let's not pretend like, oh yeah, black is winning, because that's not really what a human eye sees here. And if you are seeing something different here, then either you have analyzed it to crazy depth, or you are heavily influenced by the engine, or you are 2800. That's how I see it. And so I don't blame Rapport for thinking it's playable, but I really do blame him for not doing his homework. He clearly hasn't done his homework, and Caruana's reflection was here on point, who said after the game in an interview that everyone knows that this is not playable for white. Now, what that means is that they also had the same curiosity. They wanted to check out if it was playable for white to play for a win with knight d2. They analyzed it with the engine, and they found out exactly what happened in the game, which is that the queen is just remarkably powerful. This h3 queen is worth 15 points in this game. I'm not kidding you. And even as the game progressed, I found it incredibly difficult to understand the engine's evaluation, which now I'm going to give you is minus 1.6, which is like a clear win for black, right? So if you play it out stockfish v stockfish, out of 100 games, I reckon it's going to be 95 wins for black. Anyway, let's see why this position is so bad for white. He played rook a d1. Nepo responded with h6, which in turn is already a mistake according to the engine. The main idea being h5, so that anytime a piece lands on e3, we are going to counter it with h4. I show you a few variations that I looked at. Knight c7, just to demonstrate ideas that justify this evaluation. Takes, and the knight is en route to f4 to create a mate threat here. And this is actually a really nice point to reflect on how crazy difficult it is to hold this position for white. So I tried a few different ideas. I went back to g1 just to cover up h2 and try to be defensive. f5, knight c3, knight f4. And lo and behold, I can't hold the mate, because if this rook goes, this rook hangs. If this rook goes up, it falls into bishop g5, bishop c5, excuse me. And now the rook has to stay on the second to cover the mate, but that means I'm losing f3. So all of a sudden, we are losing the rook and the game. And these types of attacking patterns and schemes are the ones that allow black to claim a huge advantage here. Let's try bishop b8, right, to deny knight f4. I thought this will be maybe something. f5, knight g5. And now the game-winning threat is h4, or no, actually it's h4. Knight moves anywhere, and knight takes f3. And again, the two rooks are utterly useless. Absolutely, utterly useless. And if there ever was a great learning for me personally to take away from this game, is that yes, the two rooks usually outweigh the queen, but I need to take a mental note here that when it comes to defense, the two rooks are very clumsy, because they somehow always rely on each other. They are amazing at attack, right? So if you pile them up on the 7th and you hit a pawn, the queen will never be able to defend, because when you take them, the queen will come off and you will always come out on top in material. But when it comes to defense, they appear to be super clumsy, And usually they end up being loose pieces, such as the rook was in that previous line. And even here, after a4, h4, knight goes somewhere, knight f3, and that's all she wrote. We are now getting outclassed. g5, f4 is going to shut the bishop down, and mate on f2, h2, excuse me, is going to come, and it's really, really painful. So, yeah, these attacking operations are surprisingly fast considering how far the white, the black minor pieces are. Nepo played h6, which was far inferior according to the engine, and even this is a good move. The idea, by the way, was to deny knight g5, kicking the queen out. Bishop g3 looks mighty logical to human eye. I would have played it in a blink of an eye. Evaluation of the position, minus 3.1. Once again, can't believe my eyes. So I'm telling everyone who is like, I can't believe Rapport did this, and I can't. Really? Really? So you looked at this during the game and you went like, yeah, it's minus 3. Nah, that's rubbish. I don't believe that. I mean, I'm not a good enough player to clearly evaluate a position like this, but I'm a good enough player to tell you that not a lot of below 2600 GMs would look at this and go like, yep, black is winning by force. Which is actually what the engine is telling you, because minus 3 in effect is black is winning by force. And that to me is just unbelievable for this position. So whilst once again, I am critiquing Rapport very harshly on what I almost always critique him whenever I do, and I'm a huge Rapport fan, if there ever was one, is that his opening prep is not on the level of his peers. And this is a textbook case. But I don't blame him for entering this because of what it looked like. I blame him for entering this because had he done his homework, wouldn't have occurred. Anyway, let's see the game because it's super fascinating how the black pieces almost always come out very clearly triumphant. In fact, always in these various scenarios. Here, for example, amazingly, knight takes e4 is a winning move. Because after rook takes e4, we have g5. And once again, the mind-blowingly simple f5, f4, queen takes f3 is virtually unstoppable. It's like, how? Like, you just go like, how is it possible? Like, surely I can defend the pawn, right? Rook d3, no, that's mate. Rook f1, not playable because it hangs. And all of a sudden, we just don't have moves that will sufficiently defend the f3 pawn in 3 moves time, because I have a move now, I have one move to play against f5, another move against f4. I have 3 moves and I cannot organize the defense of the f3 pawn. That is just so unusual, yet so amazingly beautiful. And there is, by the way, another cool line. If f4, then queen g4, threatening both rooks. One directly, one indirectly. And if rook f1, there comes another blow, h5, h3, h4, h3, with a mate on g2. And again, the weakness of the white king tells the story. Beautiful stuff. Nepo went 96, which is also winning, by the way, but this now drops the eval down to 2.5. a3, and here Nepo actually missed knight f4. Or actually, sorry, let me rephrase that. I'm 120% sure he saw it. He didn't see why it was so great after rook g1, when according to the engine, going back to g6 with a subsequent f5, f4 again is essentially a forced win for black. But I think I understand why Nepo opted against it. The reason for that is here because knight f2 kicks the queen out from h3, and that is definitely the part of the equation that I very clearly understand, and that is that the queen on h3 is an absolute ripper. I want it there. And so if I saw this for black, I would also have gone like, nah, I'm not letting that queen to be kicked out. Turns out that the relocation on f6 hitting f3 is just as deadly. Unbelievable stuff. So I've defense c4 or queen e2 rather, actually. And again, the extremely agile queen so hardcore outclasses the rooks, it's not even funny. And it's all over. Red rover, king g2, bishop c5. And again, white army is so ridiculously tied down. Now, knight f4 check is a threat, by the way, just to note that this is not just a random move. Knight f4, queen f2 is winning next. So that's it. Anyway, Nepo opted for h5 first. Rook d3 was played. Queen f5 was played, somewhat contradicting what I told you earlier about not wanting to get the queen out of there. b4, h4. And just like that, it's all over. Unbelievable. Now, bishop takes h4 here is something I looked at. Knight f4, rook d4, queen h3. No, not queen h3, sorry, knight g6. Queen h3 is actually the trick that white was hoping that would happen, because it looks like black just wins because mate, bishop. But all of them are dealt with knight f6 followed by rook f4. It ain't over till it's over. So the right move actually for black is knight g6, exploiting the exact same idea. Too many loose pieces, but in a more accurate manner. And now black does win by force. So to avoid this, he went bishop b8 to cover f4 square and also to keep an eye on the diagonal just altogether. And here the insane c5 is yet another new super aggressive idea that the engine likes to introduce, with the concept that if I push past, then the knight now appears on d4, excuse me, to be an extremely potent attacker. Knight g5 was played just as good, hitting f3, hitting the pinned knight, hitting indirectly the rook on d3, rook e3, and after knight takes e4, once again, white is just falling apart. Absolutely surreal. I obviously can't take with the rook because f3 is hanging with check, so Rapport tried to take with the pawn, and after queen f2 with the subsequent h3, he just had nothing. And even as I look at this now, I still don't want to believe that this attack just break through so quickly with such elementary power. Let me show you the idea what happens after bishop takes, yeah, which actually looks quite dicey, because now you would assume I have got lots of rook discoveries. In reality, I don't, because I'm glued to the other rook, which is exactly this clumsy defending feature that made the two rooks so bad throughout this game. So I just go here casually, bishop d6, mate threat on h2, thank you. You go e5, and I go h3, and we shake hands. Pfft. Surreal. It's mate on g2, and after rook g1, I go bishop takes e5, just to add a bit of insult to injury. Now I'm renewing the mate threat. You can't take the bishop because it's mate into here. And so what to do? You have to take this, and now black just takes the bishop. All over. Amazing stuff. And after h3, Nepo played bishop e7, and now again another invasion is threatened with decisive effect. Now we can really see that the power of the queen around this vulnerable king is just immense. Bishop g5, bishop g1, queen d2, and now white can stop black from hunting down several pawns, but h3 in particular is really hurting. He opted for bishop e3. Now e4 was already capturable here with the check, but bishop f6 is even more cruel, relocating onto this diagonal, keeping this under attack, keeping this under attack, keeping this under attack. Remember not to be greedy and not to cash in on the threat, instead add more. Bishop a7, and now is the execution. Queen h3, king g1, queen check, and h3. And this is now essentially an unstoppable mate attack. Rapport threw in the towel after bishop g1, bishop h4, which was actually perfectly timely, because after something like a4 comes check, when bishop here is mate, and rook takes bishop takes h2 is also mate next move. That's remarkably beautiful. And if I play rook f2 here in preparation for queen f3, there comes the cold shower h2, and now bishop h2 is mate in 1, whereas rook takes loses the whole entire house. And so that was the incredible story, which was in my opinion a lot more complicated story than people made it out look to be, of the game Rapport Nepo. Long story short, do your homework, because if you enter a minefield without doing your homework, then very nasty surprises will be lurking around when you are playing against the level of player of Jan Nepomniachtchi. And by the way, other than the really hello Captain Obvious, do your homework, there is one more thing that I think would have been very wise to consider for Rapport before entering this territory with knight d2, and that is that this type of position is Nepo's bread and butter. If you give initiative and attack to Nepo, he is an unstoppable beast. Now, these kind of arguments gain less and less traction as you go higher and higher and higher on the ladder, because the higher you go, the more you focus on what's on the board. Right? So you don't take into consideration that, oh yeah, my opponent is a fearsome tactician, but tends to like positional maneuvering less. These types of arguments are really relevant on lower level of chess, and they have a great impact on the outcome of the game. As you go higher, people tend to eliminate these considerations a lot more, at the cost of incorporating what the engine says, what the objective evaluation is, yada, yada, yada. Still, I do think that if you opt to not to repeat moves against Nepo, you don't do it in a position where the alternative is that if I step out of the repetition, we are going to give him a crazy attack. That's like, nah, don't do that. But long story short, and I repeat it for the third time, I don't blame Rapport for entering that line based on the evaluation of that position. I do blame him for not doing the level of homework that is more than required for a World Championship candidate match. That being said, I remain the biggest Rapport fan, and I'm going to cheer for him for the rest of the tournament just as hard as I did before, and I really do hope that he bounces back. And at the same time, chess history got enriched by a remarkable attacking demonstration where we learned a scenario where the queen clearly outclasses the Two Rooks. I hope you liked it, guys. Please don't forget to like, to sub, to comment, or to super like even my video. Thank you very much for watching. I will be back with a new one tomorrow.